Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing good.
Excellent. I spaced out as I looked down back to the doc,
I know,
and
I
I was
could
like,
see.
I did not finish the intro that I usually do. But Logan's joining me. Each week, we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. We've done a lot of just modern day stuff recently, so we haven't done a
I
lot of the
know.
how does it hold up? Because it's always oh, this is from today or weeks ago. We were recording this
Next,
on
yeah.
Disney Plus Day here in
Oh, that's
2022,
right.
technically, the September 8th, celebrating kind of the launch of Disney Plus a couple years ago. So we had a whole bunch of new stuff to pick from for this week's episode, and we are going to do Thor: Love and Thunder, which basically it was hey, if you don't have time to watch it but you watched it in theaters, we can still do an episode on it. So that's what
I
we're doing
just
today.
watched it.
Yeah, you
It was
just
very
watched it
fresh
a
for
couple weeks
me.
ago. Yeah. I did rewatch it today, basically, as the day that it has come out. But yeah, if you like the show, please, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. With Disney Plus Day, other things we can dabble into would be Pinocchio, which I'm hearing is just maybe not good, but it'd be interesting, especially if we do a run of the live action movies. Or live action adaptations or whatever. We've got the Obi-Wan Kenobi making of
Hmm.
documentary, the making of Thor: Love and Thunder documentary that we could certainly do, and then maybe also we'll check in with She-Hulk as a mid-season check in next week. Who
I would
knows?
like that, yeah.
But yes, Logan is joining me today. We're talking about Thor: Love and Thunder because Disney Plus Day plus SEO plus Marvel is usually our best chance of getting any kind of listens and stuff. If you want to hear more about thoughts on Thor: Love and Thunder, I didn't update the doc to reflect this, but you can see that nerdy site show episode 135. I did update that part. That was where Cameron and I did a full kind of spoiler cast one. And then, was it a couple weeks ago? We did, Logan kind of gave his impressions for one of the segments buried in with one of the other more broad topic episodes. But so we got a couple That Nerdy Site shows where we've talked about Thor: Love and Thunder already extensively. So this one might not be too lengthy of an episode, but it'll still be fun to kind of go through the Disney Plus centric rigmarole and all
This
that
is our
stuff.
third time talking about it, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. It's funny.
Yep. Um,
For a movie that we all think is good.
yeah, it's fine. Yep.
Yeah.
The history lesson here. It was originally released July 8th, 2022. Other releases of the time, we had Jurassic World Dominion was in June 10th. We had
In a
Lightyear.
very weird. That's so funny. I forgot about that. Again, that's kind of a funny thing. Right now, Travia is at a friend's house watching Jurassic World Dominion. So even that has a nice, fun connective tissue
There you go.
here. I refuse because I have taste, and all the new Jurassic Park movies have been bad.
They have indeed, and this is the one I did not bother going out and seeing. I was like, I don't care.
The second one
The,
burned me. I was like, no way am I going to see anything else after that second one.
yeah, the last one was just really terrible. So I was like,
Yeah.
nope. They none of them since the first one really have been able to understand what made the first one really special, and every other one has just leaned into let's throw dinosaurs at the screen. And admittedly, they make billions of
Great.
dollars, so
Right.
it's clearly an audience for somebody out there, but not me. Um,
Yeah.
Following that, we had Lightyear, came out June 17th,
Yeah.
which we've also done a That D Plus
Watch our
show
D Plus
episode
on.
on.
Yeah.
We had Elvis came out June 24th, which I just rewatched a few days ago on HBO Max because that's now available there.
I should check that out. Yeah.
It was really good. Austin Butler in particular as Elvis
Right.
is
That's what I've heard.
performance of the year for me right now. So really good stuff. And it's basically it's neck and neck with him and the Everything Everywhere All at Once kind of cast crew. And Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Nicolas Cage was a
Nick
lot of fun in
Cage.
that too.
So good. Yeah.
On a completely other end of the spectrum, we had Minions: Rise of Gru came out July 1st. Shout out
Right.
to all of the gentle minions out there that went and
Yeah.
saw that. And then Nope in July
Oh wow,
22nd,
yeah.
which I believe is like just hitting VOD and stuff like that now.
We haven't done anything on Nope. I mean, it's not a Disney thing, I guess. That's
Yeah.
why. But Nope is great.
And it's definitely not my cup of tea given the horror stuff, but I did watch
That's a movie that
I watched the honest trailer on it and I was like, cool, good. Glad
there's
Jordan Peele's out there
only- I
making
think-
stuff.
I think you could watch 90% of that movie and be totally fine.
Yeah. That's what I got
but-
from the trailer or from the
yeah,
honest trailer. It
there's
was like,
one sequence in particular that is among the most like graphic, intense things I think I've seen in a movie in years and years and years.
is it the, for vague spoilery things, sitcom
Yeah, Gordy's
scene?
home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
like it's just yeah, it is like especially because I watched it in like IMAX and it is just like it is a surreal thing. But that movie's real good, and I like the best description I think I still have for Nope is it is Jordan Peele doing like evil like E.T. or like evil like Close Encounters and like that kind of vibe to it, and it is very Spielberg in like all the best ways.
Cool. I also saw it compared to The Happening, so I don't know. It
Ooh,
seems
okay.
like it runs the spectrum.
Right, yeah, that's interesting.
Anyway, back to Thor: Love and Thunder. Film has a runtime of 1 hour and 58 minutes. In the MCU timeline of things, we had Moon Knight came out in March through May of this year. We had Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness May 6th. Miss Marvel June through July. Thor: Love and Thunder here right at the tail end of that. She-Hulk is currently running as we record this. We're about halfway through the She-Hulk run. We also had I Am Groot in there somewhere, but that's a nothing burger. And then Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is our next film in the slate, coming out November 11th, 2022. As a big nerdy Lego fan, they just like revealed this like crazy Black Panther bust that you can make out of Lego. That's basically like the headpiece and do like and the arms doing the Wakanda Forever thing. It's like, that's really cool. I don't necessarily want or need that or have the space for it. And also I don't like that it's like they have like a helmet series of things. In particular, I have like a couple of I have the Star Wars ones. But they have Batman helmets and stuff like that. And they're just like little, throw it on a shelf kind of thing. This is like a massive beast that's like 3 times the size of like what they have been doing with that. So it's like, that's okay. All right. So I imagine somewhere down the line where there's going to be like an Iron Man bust or a Spider-Man bust, and that's just going to become a new big budget, big ticket item thing that they'll be doing. But anyway, yeah, shout out for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Also shout out to Chadwick Boseman winning a posthumous Emmy Award for his performance in What If recently.
Absolutely.
Our roll call here: Taika Waititi, of course, as the director, having worked on projects like What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People, and then really coming into a whole new echelon of prominence with Thor Ragnarok, and then also wonderful work on Jojo Rabbit, one of my favorite films of recent years. So he's back here.
I will give a shout out because Taika Waititi's great. We each, I assume, are big Taika Waititi fans. But I'm glad you included it because it is maybe my favorite Taika Waititi movie, which is Hunt for the Wilder People. I think is like a really fantastic film that kind of gets slept on a little bit because of what happened with Ragnarok and What We Do in the Shadows, but it is a phenomenal film and a great performance by Sam Neill.
There you go. The writers here, Taika Waititi, of course, having also
we're gonna have a few of him mentions here.
Written all of the above, but his writing partner on this was Jennifer Caton Robinson, who has also previously written on Sweet Vicious, Someone Great, and Unpregnant. Don't know what any of those were, but they were her writing credits. She was also a consulting producer on Hawkeye last year, on the Marvel series Hawkeye.
Interesting.
Starring, we have, of course, Chris Hemsworth returning as Thor, having been in stuff like Star Trek and Ghostbusters, and having played Thor since 2011, and like a bajillion other things that he's done since then. Natalie Portman playing Jane. I always first remember seeing her in Leon the Professional, even before her Star Wars prequel era run. She's been playing Jane since the original Thor. Obviously, she had a lengthy hiatus there after Dark World, but she did come back for this one. Christian Bale joining the MCU here as Gore the God Butcher. Shout out to his, early work in Newsies or American Psycho, and of course, probably best known to audiences as the Christopher Nolan Batman. Tessa Thompson playing King Valkyrie. She's been in the series Westworld, which is continuing on even now, I believe. She's also in Creed. She was in Sorry to Bother You. We were talking about Armie Hammer before we started recording. Shout out to a very weird, peculiar performance from Armie Hammer in that one. And just Sorry to Bother You is also just a all-around wild movie. She's been playing Valkyrie since Thor Ragnarok in 2017. Taika Waititi, of course, here also as Korg. Acting-wise, cameos in all of his other stuff, but most notably he was Hitler in Jojo Rabbit. He's also in The Mandalorian, and recently this year he was in Lightyear. He's been playing Korg since Thor Ragnarok in 2017. And we have our little group of Guardians of the Galaxy, most of which have been in the MCU since Guardians 1 in 2014. However, Mantis didn't join until Guardians 2, 2017, which is like, it's like this, like, oh, I forgot she wasn't in the first one kind of thing, because she's been around for so long at this point. But we have Chris Pratt as Peter Quill / Star-Lord, having also worked on Parks and Rec and the aforementioned Jurassic World series. Dave Bautista playing Drax, previously having been in projects like the WWE, as well as Blade Runner 2042 and Dune. Yes. Karen Gillan playing Nebula, known to many for her work
Amy
on
Pond.
Doctor Who as Amy Pond. Pom Klementieff as Mantis, playing previously in Old Boy or Ingrid Goes West. Sean Gunn as Kraglin, in addition to being James Gunn's brother, was in Gilmore Girls for many, many years, which I did not necessarily know until looking this up. And he was also recently in The Suicide Squad. Vin Diesel as Groot, obviously Fast and Furious and all that stuff. Bradley Cooper as Rocket, going all the way back to Wet Hot American Summer, Silver Linings Playbook, A Star is Born, any number of
Wedding
other
Crashers,
projects. Was he in Wedding Crashers?
Yeah, he is the boyfriend of Rachel McAdams' character that Owen Wilson is trying to break up.
All right. Never saw it. And then we have just kind of a flurry of cameo level things here. Russell Crowe as Zeus, probably the most notable of them. Of course, having been in many, many prominent projects, probably most notably Gladiator. Jamie Alexander returns as Sif for the first time in actually not too long, because she did have like a little appearance in the Loki series, but she was definitely out of Thor Ragnarok because of conflicts with the TV show she was doing, Blind Spot, something
like
Blind
that.
Spot, I think.
Blind Spot, maybe, yeah.
Not Blind Spotting. That is a very different movie / series.
Right? Yeah.
That was the David Diggs one.
Yeah.
Daley Pearson makes his return as Daryl the tour guide, having been Daryl.
Oh shit, that's the same guy
since the Team Thor shorts. Yes.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Cam and I talked about him in when we did our big spoiler cast. But yes, his little Daryl is made like canon now.
That is awesome.
Making the jump from those weird little Team Thor shorts.
That's so cool.
Kat Dennings and Stellan Skarsgård returning as little brief Darcy and Eric Selvig cameos, going all the way back to the original Thor. The trio of actors from Thor Ragnarok in Matt Damon as actor Loki, Luke Hemsworth as actor Thor, and Sam Neill as actor Odin all reprised their roles. And they're joined this time around by Melissa McCarthy as actor Hela. Idris Elba makes a little post-credits cameo tease in as Heimdall, having played Heimdall since 2011's Thor. And Brett Goldstein makes his debut in the mid-credits sequence as Hercules. Brett Goldstein, of course, best known as the gruff and foul-mouthed Roy Kent from Ted Lasso. I remember like seeing that in theaters. It was like one of the things that hadn't been spoiled, and he popped up, and I was like, oh, that's a funny choice. Very cool. Interested to see wherever that goes. Diving into some of the trivia here. We have a lot of actors, family members as cameos throughout the film. Many of Chris Hemsworth's family is in there. His son is one of the young Thors. His daughter is Love, Gore's daughter / like Love at the end of the film. Another daughter is in there as an Asgardian child. Of course, I already mentioned his brother is actor Thor. His wife is the wolf lady lover that he has in the little montage at the beginning. And she's also Elena, I believe, from Fast and Furious, for those that like that little crossover universe. And then Natalie Portman, Christian Bale, and Taika Waititi, like a lot of their kids are also scattered throughout as various other extras. Korg's god Nini Nani sits on a throne of scissors because, of course, rock, paper, scissors. Rock beats scissors. It's just a fun little visual gag. I appreciated this. On the days that they would film kissing scenes, Chris Hemsworth would abstain from meat because Natalie Portman is vegan. So,
I saw that.
Shout
That was
out.
like one of the press stories floating around, I think, when it was like filming.
Yeah. The discrepancy mentioned in the film between Jane and Thor regarding the breakup, whereas Jane says, what's it been, 3 to 4 years? And Thor gives like a very specific 8 years, 7 months, and 6 days, suggests that Jane was dusted in the snap and blip.
This is the only one that I will throw like a maybe challenge flag on. Of like,
Oh, yeah.
I got that as more of just like she just got like lost in her work and like didn't know how long it had been, whereas Thor was more affected by the break kind of thing, unless like, oh, she was blipped.
Yeah. And it's definitely left a little bit more open to interpretation for that regard. It's supported by I don't know if it made it into the movie of Endgame, but I believe like in the script, Jane Foster's name is one of the like names mentioned in various like screens and stuff that they're looking at as like people that are missing, people that blipped. So yeah. I started to write this one down and then I did not finish the trivia. But in the Hall of Eternity at the end, there are statues reflecting Lady Death, one of the Sentinels, the Watcher from the What If series, and then there was like one other notable one. The Living Tribunal, who also makes an appearance in Multiverse of Madness. They go through a universe where the Living Tribunal is in the like flurry of 15-20 universes that they go through. And lastly, just a little thing that the Necrosword in the comics has very symbiote origins, a la Venom and Venom's people. But they didn't really delve too deeply into that, likely because of legal repercussions and stuff.
There's a lot happened in the movie, to be fair, as well.
Also true, yes. So yeah, let's dive in. Logan, we talked about this a little bit, a couple weeks ago. But what were your thoughts here of Thor: Love and Thunder?
It's a great question. I like it.
Yep.
Right. I think it is good. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's bad. I think it's leagues better than Multiverse of Madness. Right. Like I was kind of looking a little bit at the run of, MCU movies and shows we've had. And to be fair, like it is obviously a little unfair to compare the movies and TV shows because they're very different things that they're trying to do. But that's what I'm going to do anyway. Right. And, Miss Marvel's my favorite MCU thing, period, since Endgame, with maybe the exception of No Way Home. I like She-Hulk a pretty good amount, actually. We haven't really talked about this since the first episode, but I am digging it. And so, like, I'd probably say this is my third favorite MCU thing, right? Multiverse of Madness is bad. Moon Knight never looked appealing, and from what I've heard, it wasn't really that great. And so, like, I think it's even within the most recent stuff, it is sort of where I have it in the larger MCU pantheon, which is just like mid tier, not the worst, not the best, and that seems really fitting. I think it is sort of a really strange movie in that it is both really ambitious and also it feels like completely directionless at times. And they are like introducing really big things into the MCU, but doing it in sort of a like blink and you miss it almost kind of fashion. And again, we'll get into this in a little bit, I'm sure, but my general thoughts on them just having no idea what to do with the character of Thor for the last 11 years now is just sort of strengthened by this movie. But I think Chris Hemsworth is great. I think Natalie Portman is Natalie Portman, so she's also great. And I like Korg. I think it's fair to ask, is he in the movie too much or is it too much of him? Maybe. But I like him. I like Taika Waititi. And I think the actors and their performances are not my issue with the movie for the most part. Oh, Christian Bale's great too.
Yeah. I'm right there alongside on a lot of that stuff. I think on the Korg front, just kind of working backwards, I think especially having Korg as the narrator as many times as he is just too much Korg for me.
I agree with that. We talked about that.
Yeah.
I totally
and it's very much like, I mean, like the charm and wonder of Thor Ragnarok was such a departure from the previous Thor movies. And this one obviously doesn't recapture that magic in the same way because it's not new and fresh anymore. It's still trying a lot of the same kind of stuff, and it's still doing a lot of the like, we're going to throw as many jokes as we can at the wall, and you know, some of them are going to hit, some of them are going to miss. For me, like especially on a rewatch, the goat stuff is funny like one time on a rewatch, and it's when the goats crash into the planet, and that's it. Otherwise, it's a lot of screaming goats. Too much screaming goats for this movie, especially as somebody who like, I'm too old for those shitty memes anyway. And it's very much, we talked again about this on the That Nerdy Site show when we talked about it with you, and I think Cameron and I talked about it on the spoiler cast as well. Is just like the movie, especially with the more, you know, heartbreaking elements of Jane's story, could have gone some really interesting places, but that's not going to be what Taika Waititi does. Taika Waititi isn't going to like let those moments simmer or let those moments hit, because it's going to be like, let's have a really, you know, touching scene, but let's end it with a button. Let's end it with a million jokes. Instead of just letting some of those things really resonate, and let us, you know, feel sad about this journey that she's going on. It's very much like a rushed storyline, and it's, I mean, so much so in terms of like the pacing and introduction of her. Like, obviously we're introduced to her, she's got cancer, then she shows up at Asgard, and then we cut away from her, and the next thing we see, she's out there as Mighty Thor, and so like we don't even get her origin really, except for, you know, as a cutaway gag or as you know, the butt of a joke or something like that. So it I think does a disservice to some of the characters when we don't get to have like emotional beats for them, especially you know, going off of like the fact that the movie opens with just poking fun at all of the trauma that Thor has gone through, of like losing his mom, losing his dad, losing his brother multiple times, losing his best friends in the Warriors 3, which like are just, again, like he lost that guy, and I don't know who that guy is. And it's like almost indicative of Taika Waititi as a meta thing, being like, yeah, I didn't care about those characters, so I killed them off and did it as a joke, as a gag, didn't give them anything to really do. And now we're going to like just dredge that up. And Thor, especially in between Ragnarok and now, had the arc of like Infinity War and Endgame, like, and letting that simmer and letting that trauma like hit him, especially in Endgame and his whole arc in
And
that film. Uh,
process it, I think, right? And kind
yeah,
of move to a new stage, and then we kind of
and then it's
go
resetting
back.
back to Ragnarok here,
Right.
and let's just kind of make him, let's reset him as a himbo,
Yeah.
and just play with that.
Right.
And so it is that, to what we talked about, and what you alluded to earlier. It's the Thor has, we've gone through so many different versions of Thor, and Chris
Right.
Hemsworth, always enjoyable, always likable, but yeah, it's very clear that he's very much been, he's doing whatever is asked of him for every different director
Right.
that has come in, starting with Branagh to Alan
Right.
Johnson to the Russo brothers, and then now here to and Taika Waititi, and kind of juggling between Russo brothers and Taika Waititi stuff.
I
Um,
think,
yeah,
for me too, it is, yeah, I mean, like, he's sort of the workman horse of the, like, main Avengers team, right? Whereas, you know, Cap and Tony had really defined arcs really early on, and they went through them. And whether or not you like how those arcs ended, Iron Man should have ended at Iron Man 3 or not. They had very clearly established arcs, and they were the two kind of pillars of the MCU for a decade, right? And Thor just sort of operated when he was needed and did a job he was needed. And if you needed him to be in like a like superhero Shakespearean movie, like the first Thor film with Kenneth Branagh, then that's what he's gonna do.
hmm
If you
he
needed him to be like utterly ridiculous and goofy in Ragnarok, he can do that.
yeah.
Um,
It's interesting. It's fascinating because it is like we had those two pillars of Iron Man and Captain America, and then we also had Thor movies getting made, but he wasn't a
mhm.
pillar. He wasn't,
No,
he was, which is especially interesting because like he did, going back to that original Thor and continuing on with Dark World and stuff like that. He was bringing in, like, he was the first bringing in of the cosmic stuff. He was bringing in magic and gods and stuff like that, versus like the
Ragnarok is the last movie
realistic.
before Infinity War, if I remember correctly, right? Like it's
I
like
mean, yeah,
right where
it's
Tony's
yeah,
bringing in that stuff, right? And so
yep.
he's kind of responsible for like leading to like the big event movies, or like dealing with like the direct aftermath of them. But it's more just almost like cleanup work in some ways. Um, and in some ways, he is sort of unique among the Avengers, right? Because yeah, Hawkeye's Hawkeye, right? He never was like a major tier Avenger. No, if it's a Hawkeye, right? And you know, even the closest parallel to Thor, which is probably like the Bruce Banner Hulk character, he hasn't had a single standalone movie with Mark Ruffalo, right? So like even he is sort of like his own distinct thing, and is almost like a really fun secondary character these people play off of, right? Where like Thor is like clearly a main character, but not a pillar, and sort of just is always changing. And he is, yeah, I think he's just like a workman, and Chris Hemsworth does what he's asked to do and does it in really like, you know, really great way, I think, every time. Here, I think the balance is just not quite right, right? Like, I think he's so good in Ragnarok, and I think they try to go that same direction, but it's a little bit too much. There's very little that is grounded in him in this movie, whereas there was still some stuff in Ragnarok. Because like even a lot of his stuff with like the Jane storyline, again, going back to like you had already processed most of this stuff, and so like when we get back to like I'm really lonely and Jane's back and like I don't know how to like it's like this is kind of a beat we'd already had, I felt like, but we need to have it now, right? And so so much of this movie is just like really rushed. I will say I do think the goats worked in one additional scene, which is just the quick cut to them on the Guardian ship and the goats scream and is everyone trying to have a fight. I think that moment works really well because that is like really the first big laugh of the goats, and I think it's very effective. Also, the Guardians leaving the goats with Thor is really funny too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it just I think Thor's entire 11 years in the MCU is sort of indicative of this entire movie. It's just sort of like kind of all over the place and a little sloppy, and there are really great moments and other moments that don't really work. And like we haven't really talked about it really in this podcast yet, but even on our That Nerdy Science show, I think, which is like, I actually kind of want to talk about like Gore a little bit and his whole arc, because like I really like Christian Bale and I really like his motivation a lot, and I like so much of what that character is doing, and he's creepy and he is like, we're actually getting a really great MCU villain for once. And then like, man, do I not really love his last like 5 minutes on screen. It just doesn't work the way I think they want me to, like the love element of it.
Yeah, my biggest issue, I do think he showed up and he, brought his Christian Bale-ness to the role and helped elevate it.
His opening where he kills that first god is so good.
Yeah. I mean, like, and also the scenes with him like scaring the children, I guess, to
Right.
like, I don't know
Yeah.
necessarily if that was his intent, but obviously, because there's like,
I think so.
there's
Yeah.
there's
he's,
but
he's
there
a little creepy. Yeah.
but he has like a weird little playfulness to it of, the kids are talking about, excited about how Thor used his axe to cut off Thanos' head, and then he comes in, he tries to bond, he's like, here's a little thing, let me rip its head off. Oh, you guys liked it a minute ago. Like, so
Right.
like he's definitely like, there's a joy to his malice in an interesting way. My biggest problem with a character named Gore the God Butcher is we see almost no God butchering.
Right.
We see that first one, and then like there's a lot of like tell don't show instead of show don't tell in this.
I wonder how much of that is like also like the PG-13 nature, like the MCU, like the not want to just see him murder a bunch of people.
Sure, but I mean, you still like, you have to create him as some kind of threat, I think,
Right.
as opposed to just, oh, here's a million videos that the Guardians of the Galaxy are suddenly getting that are like, oh, our gods are dying. It's like, but we're not seeing any of those, and we see like the aftermath of the big god that is a very, iconic shot from that story arc or whatever, where Lady Sif is, lost an arm or whatever. And so, yeah, it's just like, he doesn't do any god butchering throughout. And it almost like there is a beat missing in the movie for me in that regard of, and I guess, or I know why they didn't do it, but like it almost feels like he should have shown up at Omnipotent City and gone on a spree killing gods and stuff. And it could, happen in the distance
almost, like,
as they flee or whatever.
That's what's going to happen almost, because they keep referencing like that idea
Yeah.
multiple times in that scene, and like nothing ever really pays off on it.
Yeah. One thing that I definitely like on a rewatch, first time I watched it, I did not catch all the things that he's seeing in his like initial vision as he picks up the Necrosword. And when I watched it a second time in theaters, I still like, I caught a little bit more because I knew where the journey was going. But like watching it here at home is probably the biggest highlight I've seen for like, wow, just movie theaters have terrible audio mixing these days, because having it play on my phone next to me as I was like playing video games last night or whatever, I could very clearly hear the voice of the Necrosword basically saying like, summon the Bifrost, go to eternity, all this stuff. Did not hear it all in theaters. And then the added bonus of being able to read it on the subtitles and stuff. So it was just like oh yeah, like movie theaters just have terrible audio quality these days, or especially for my like older, played drums for way too many years that I have. But yeah, that jumped out at me as like wow, that was such a notable difference of like, oh, I'm getting everything I need to know about his plan from that. And it's definitely like fragmented and vague enough that unless you've seen the movie, you don't necessarily know everything, but it's so much more apparent that I could hear summon the Bifrost and things like that. I was like, oh, that's wild. But yeah, so like I really liked Christian Bale as Gore.
Yeah.
I just didn't, they didn't have enough to do. And I'll say even like, I'll disagree with you a little bit in terms of like, I didn't have an issue with the end of his story. Because it seemed like a fitting. The only reason I would have an issue with it is that it seems like such a well, duh kind of thing of like, well, yeah, if you have like one wish, of course you've been doing this entire thing for your daughter, so of course wishing your daughter back to life would be the proper wish to make, as opposed to wishing all gods dead. But even that is like, okay, well, the necro sword like deliberately twists his mind a little bit to be like, all right, that I can excuse that. So if anything, like, I don't think the end of the movie is necessarily for or about him as much as it is Thor and Thor having that like, I'm gonna go to her, because if this is my last moments, why would I want to
Right.
waste them
I
with
like that
you?
beat.
And so
I
like that's
think,
the focal point of the beat, and
yeah.
like the one moment where the movie kind of lets him have, you know, a nice little emotional closure, because it isn't just like, oh, I'm also gonna wish that Jane's back to life or anything like that. Like Jane's dies, and like Thor has to deal with that too.
I did think it was interesting that love lives and is like
I
fine
mean, it's
when
definitely
like
very dumb that her name is Love. I'll say
sure,
that. Yeah.
but like just the fact that like she lives when like I feel like every single story with like no exaggeration, like every story I've ever been told in my entire life about like bringing people back from the dead, the like one rule is always like, but they're like corrupted versions of themselves. Like they're not like there's it's always bad. Like that's like the one rule in like any magic or like resurrection story is like, oh, you can't bring someone back from the dead. A genie story, you can't bring them back from the dead. Like anything like that. And it's like, oh, she's back and she's fine. It's like, oh, okay, like I'm so conditioned after 30 years of stories being like, that's the one thing you can't do to be like, oh, okay, like it just worked. Like
Yeah.
I was so ready for her to like come back and then like her like dissolve with her dad when he died. Like that's where I was like, it's like, oh no, she's just a superhero now. Cool. I was like,
She's
all right, that's an unexpected twist on this formula.
Yeah, she and it, like, I don't know if we get enough of her. Like, I think we get little enough of her that there is still like they could go that route in a future
Sure, and that's
story.
totally the thing. Like also like we don't know if there's even going to be another Thor movie. To
Yeah,
be fair, like that could just be no more, and it's just how it ends, and it's big.
yeah.
Like it, like so much of this movie, and I'm curious of your thoughts on this. Like it at times felt like they had the things they wanted to hit, and they didn't really know how they were going to get there, and so they just sort of like backtracked it from there to get there the best way they could. And like this is an element of like they knew they wanted to get Thor and Love together in the title at the end, and like that was the whole arc. And it's like, how do we make this happen? And it's like this is the easiest enough way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so I watched the I don't remember if I did an episode on it, but I watched the I think I did. Yeah. The Multiverse of Madness behind the scenes. And the writer of
Doctor
that
Strange. Okay.
was very candid about the idea that like he handed in a treatment of the script, and then COVID shut down everything, and so suddenly he had another like 6 months to write. But like that first treatment he handed in was largely dictated by, here are the sequences we've had in visual effects working on the last 2 years leading up to the movie, kind of thing. So you gotta like you have to build the movie around these action sequences and stuff like that. And I feel like Thor Love and Thunder, like with that like nugget in the back of my mind, I felt that with Thor Love and Thunder too. Like, hey, we got to have this sequence where we're going to have everybody fight in New Asgard, and we're going to show off, you know, this Mjolnir thing. We got to have a sequence where you know, they're going to fight in Omnipotent City with the gods. We're going to have a sequence that's going to be this black and white kind of, you know, on this weird little like Mario Galaxy planet. And then we're gonna have this like the children rampaging with lightning powers at the end, and the opening fight with like with the Guardians and stuff like that. So it felt like they had like those 5 things, and it was like, all right, let's connect the dots from 1 through 5, and just kind of hearing more and more about how like the sausage is made. Seems like, yeah, that's I mean, especially like even going back to Thor Ragnarok, I remember before the movie came out, stories coming out about like, oh, only like 20% of the movie was scripted or something like that. 80% is like improvised and stuff like that. And being like, what the hell is that going to be like? And then realizing that like they pretty much tell all of like the key story beats that they want to tell in that, like up front of like, here's Odin gone. This is going to be New Asgard. And here's Hela. And like go. And then like everything on Sakaar feels like, riffing and
Oh my
improv
god, yeah.
stories and stuff like that. And so like the and in that case, like the beats that are like, here are the Marvel things they needed to like set up for Infinity War Endgame stuff, feels like it feels like a different movie a little bit compared
Mm,
to the rest of the Taika Waititi-ness of it. And this one I think like loses a little bit of the Taika Waititi-ness
mm-hmm.
in favor, not even necessarily setting up things for the future, but just kind of like in favor of, here are big, sequences that we want to touch on, or telling the mighty Thor story. Here are the bits of Jane's arc that we're going to touch on in this. But again, like I think the story that they decided they could tell, and Taika Waititi's just like, we're going to make jokes about everything sensibility,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we're at odds for a lot of this film, I think, tonally, in ways
Yeah,
that worked less for me than Thor Ragnarok did.
right. I also think there is an element of this movie. It almost felt less like they had to set things up, but more like they were constantly having to like either wrap up storylines from prior things, or also just like they were having to just reintroduce a key character to this movie after like a 9-year absence in Jane, right? Like
Yeah.
if she had just been in the movies before this, that would have been an easier thing. Wrapping up like the fact that like Thor was with the Guardians is like the first 50 minutes of the movie, when it's like obviously if that had been worried about, you could have just hit the ground running a bit smoother. And so this movie, what is, I think the best word I can describe it is that like I think some people have always been like, what are the real world consequences of like superheroes in this world, right? And Avengers living among us. And I think this movie actually gives you quite a bit of that. And at least for me, in this case, it is always the least interesting parts of the movie for me, right? Like all of the stuff with like New Asgard and it being turned into like an amusement park and like the business nature of that and all that kind of stuff, like none of it really worked for me. And it's like, oh man, yeah, like it is way more fun to just not think about what like the implications of like how this works would be, at least in the way it's presented here. Because none of it was just like, oh, I don't like any of this, and this is all kind of janky. The stuff with Thor and Jane is just sort of like undercut a little bit by the fact that they are just having to like retcon this event because like they just didn't have an appointment for 9 years, and so like, oh, like that's why she wasn't around here. And I actually think it's I actually think those moments are effective, but they're also undercut, going back to the thing you said at the beginning, by Korg's narration through it. And obviously it would have just been smoother altogether if they just had her. And like even Natalie Portman herself, like I was surprised that I mean, we didn't, I guess, say it, but like spoiler alert, like the fact that she dies at the end of this movie, like I was at least a little bit surprised by. But like also sort of like that's cool. Like again, I am the biggest person who's gonna always say I love when MC movies have consequences. But it did feel weird for like a Thor movie to have consequences, and that maybe that is like the series that is like most immune to having things actually matter. Hence Loki dying multiple times,
Mm-hmm.
and Thor constantly changing. But like, it's just sort of a funky movie, and it's got its hands in a lot of pots, and like it's a little bit like I think No Time to Die in terms of like having to like wrap up shit from other movies and its first like chunk of the thing. And just as I didn't love it in No Time to Die, I don't really love it here. I just think it like when you said at the beginning of this episode that it's like an hour and 58 minutes long, I was like, oh my god, I thought it was 20 minutes longer than that at least. Like this is a movie that feels its length, and that's sort of crummy. But like, I feel like I've said a lot of like less great things on it, but like I do think this movie is very funny. I do think this movie has like really unique, cool like worlds it's going to. Like the whole like black and white kind of finale world they're on, and just everything is in black and white, I think is like such a cool visual like style and aesthetic and like setting for that sequence with Gore and Thor and Jane,
And Valkyrie.
And I think those elements are really like, I really like the, you know, pantheon of gods that are surrounded there, even if I think it's sort of dumb that they're all just like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's true though. Like these are all like all the gods are just like shitty people who like don't actually care about their subjects. But like I think that I guess world, I don't really know what you would call that place, is like beautiful. Like it is gorgeous. And I think this has some of my favorite looking unique locations of any MCU movie, because so often MCU movies are just like, we're in a cityscape somewhere or we're in a field because no one is going to get injured in our fights, Man of Steel. And so, you know, I do like when they can go visit more like lush and unique locations like they can here or in Guardians movies. Um, and so that side of it I really like. I really like Gore, even though I think his ending is maybe a little wobbly for me. But like leaving this movie, I very much had the idea of like, I really don't know what direction a Thor 5 would go from here, right? Whereas like after Ragnarok, it was like pretty clearly if you're gonna make another Thor movie, it's gotta be like Ragnarok. You're not gonna go back to Kenneth Branagh's Thor. And here it's now more like, I don't know, like, do you try a third version of this where like maybe it's gonna kind of get the formula right again, or maybe it'll just be like even more diminished returns? Do you try to make Thor more serious for like a fifth movie? Do you even bother? Like, what does Chris Hemsworth want to do? That's also an important element of this, obviously. But like, we're just in a weird spot with the MCU in general, and it's obviously hurt by real world things that they didn't plan on. Obviously, we talked about like Chadwick Boseman passing away. Like, obviously, Black Panther was going to be an integral part of the post Endgame MCU. That's just not going to happen now. They're wrapping up Guardians of the Galaxy and those characters' arcs. They killed off Wanda. Spoiler alert for another movie, I guess, but whatever. Like Tom Holland and Spider-Man is a like TBD. Like maybe we're not going to get any more movies with him. Maybe we are. Like Cap obviously is gone. Iron Man's gone. Bruce Banner, Hulk. I mean, he's a supporting character. It's like we're just in this weird thing where like Chris Hemsworth is like continuously important because like who would step into these shoes kind of thing. And so like it makes it. And Captain Marvel hasn't done anything since her movie. Basically, she made like a cameo in Miss Marvel and a cameo in Endgame. It felt like, and that was it. And so like we're just at this point where I'm just so curious of like what the MCU at large looks like going forward. And so obviously what the future of Thor and his movies and his arcs would be plays a big part of that, because like, yeah, it might be easy to say like maybe we kind of wind his arc down, but also you can't do that if you have no one to take his spot, and you have to fill a key role anyway in the loss of Black Panther and a key role anyway in the loss of the Guardians of the Galaxy series. And so I don't know what the future of Thor looks like, or the MCU in general, really. That's the larger conversation, obviously. But
yeah, I mean, I definitely think we are in like this weird transitional period now between like
right.
the obviously the Infinity Saga arc now into the multiverse saga, that as they're calling it, where it is, yeah, some of that old guard has started to step away and is continuing to trickle away as new characters are being introduced in the series and in the films that are seemingly going to lead up to like kind of the Thunderbolts as like the pinnacle of a phase, and then we're gonna bring everybody back in together for Secret Wars stuff, and theoretically somewhere along the line, Marvel's gonna introduce Fantastic Four in a more proper setting and start peppering in mutants and X-Men stuff like that, and that's potentially what the next phase
looks like
things
obviously
will be, as some of those like other stalwarts have kind of stepped away or timed away and timed out and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting whichever direction all that stuff goes. I mean, for what this movie sets up as a potential option for Thor, seemingly it's going to be some kind of like father-daughter-esque romp thing, while Hercules is out there looking for vengeance for Zeus, and the gods declare war on Thor or something like that. Who knows? but yeah, it is interesting. A couple like final thoughts I wanted to just circle back around to. One, it's interesting you highlighting like the finality of like Jane's death, because it is for me, it is especially undercut by the post credits thing where we see Heimdall and Jane, and enough of the movie like really like highlights Valhalla and whatnot in this like afterlife thing. And in the comics, like, yeah, people can come back from Valhalla, and Valhalla is like just another realm as an afterlife kind of thing. So like it for me it does undercut that of like, oh, okay, she can still come back. Like Heimdall can come back.
Heimdall might, Jane back, I think.
I think either of them could. And it would be interesting to see like Natalie Portman, I mean, for, you know, just the work that she does.
I think it's Natalie Portman, right? If it was a generic actress who was Jane, I think it'd be maybe more likely.
But the other thing I wanted to touch on, because you mentioned him, I think this movie, I think one of the key things that this movie is missing for me is the Loki relationship. It is the first time, apart from like the Avengers, like Endgame stuff, where we have a Thor that has no Loki to bounce off of and to have any of that stuff. And I think part of why he feels adrift for me in this movie for me is because he doesn't have that anchor of Loki, and the relationship that he and Tom Hiddleston had built up over the course of all of their different adventures and stuff.
And even
like
in Endgame, the like spirit of Loki is still there, because it's like the immediate aftermath of him like losing Loki, right, and like dealing with like that and having to kind of process.
I mean, even that, I guess, like loss. he is like, so in Infinity War kicks off with like Loki's death, at the hands of Thanos, but then like when they travel back to 2012, Loki is there in past and you know, grabs the Tesseract and bounces out. So like even there was still a little bit of Loki to play around with.
That's a really interesting point, Trevor. I didn't even think about just like how big that character. Again, he's the kind of other half of that same coin.
Yeah, and so yeah, like losing him, losing the like again, like you said, so much of the dynamic of Thor Ragnarok was Thor and the Hulk, or Thor and Banner, and so like you lose that as well. And while Valkyrie's great, like her arc is like just a weird arc, because
I don't even know what the arc is, honestly.
I mean, like she doesn't really have an arc in this movie. Her arc is she got everything she wanted and is now like the king of this, but like she doesn't want to be king. She wants to be out there fighting. She wants to be a warrior.
Her, like, going back and it's like it doesn't really do that.
If anything, she should have died on the Phantom Planet or the Shadow Planet or whatever when Gore stabs her, and that's more of a fake out than anything. Of like she gets stabbed and then they go back and she's gonna be fine. It's kind of thrown away. Like she'll pull through.
They don't even show her in the hospital. They just show Jane and she's just like on a bench and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're fine, I guess. Okay, cool.
So like. Yeah, it was just a movie that lacked stakes. As a result, and as we touched on, you know, like the banter between Thor and Korg is fun until you slip into Barney Stinson territory and Korg just becomes it spins out and becomes the Stifler effect, the Barney Stinson, all those like what was a great side character becomes less so the more you get of him.
The Fonz, to be a real old school reference for all our older listeners out there.
There you go. So yeah, I think those are kind of the final just like but all that said, there is still a lot of fun in this movie.
It is by no means the worst. It's not even the worst Thor movie.
Yeah, so. Of course not. And I will one other thing I want to touch on. The music. I'm not a huge Guns N' Roses fan. That just wasn't my era or whatever. But like, I think every Guns N' Roses song is worked to incredible appeal and flavor, with the exception of November Rain. And Cam and I talked about this when we did the spoiler cast, and Cam's like, no, it's an epic thing, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure it is a ballad. I'm pretty sure November Rain is like a rock ballad kind of thing.
It is
And
a epic ballad, to be fair. It's like 10 minutes long. It
yeah,
is like
exactly. Cameron pushed back on that. So it being the soundtrack to all of the kids getting the powers and fighting, I'm just like, this is the complete opposite tone of the Led Zeppelin like bridge moment from Thor Ragnarok. And so like that huge misfire for me, and I'm like, this doesn't work for the action of the scene. But like the music in the first sequence, the first fight, and then like the recurring kind of motif of the like 80s and 90s like metal ballads or metal tones and stuff like that, like works for most of the movie. But yeah, November Rain is just like a big whiff for me in terms of like, this doesn't fit the like what could be a really like it's incredibly fun and epic visuals of these kids fighting with like stuffed animals that are now imbued with the power of Thor and stuff like that. And instead of being a, Carry On My Wayward Son or a Led Zeppelin kind of thing or something like fun and like upbeat, it's like slow rock ballad thing. I'm just like, nope, wrong tone for me. So, but other than that, like I really enjoyed and also shout out to the Enya little bit at the beginning as Thor's out there like meditating and stuff. Because Enya coming in as a comic beat is always a good pull. But yeah, what did you? I
did want to say like the last thing I'll probably say is the kids in general didn't work for me for most of this movie, with the exception of like I think that final like fights involving them getting powers is so fun. It's like it's such a great like whether the music works or not, I don't really care. Just like the visuals of it both A look great and B are just so funny. There's so many great bits and moments and like Easter eggy things, just like how they hand off different weapons and like gizmos, and it's great fun. I didn't need maybe as much of the kids we got because I think that was a bit more wobbly. But yeah, that sequence in particular is like great. That whole final sequence is really, really good. I think all the fights that I kind of had.
Yeah, that's like going back to my gripe of Gore not doing enough god butchering. Like really, Gore is the Asgardian kidnapper. Like that's his name for what we get in this movie. He's not Gore the God Butcher. He just takes some kids and like hides them from Thor for most of this movie. It's like that's not as menacing or as villainous also, as he could have been.
A weird plan because like not to get too into the weeds of this at the end of the episode, but like it's also a weird plan because like the movie makes you think that like, oh, he's doing it to like lead them into a trap to then kill Thor, and like in a way it's a trap so that he can get like Thor's like weapon, but like it doesn't really give a shit about Thor, right? And like he could have just as easily found another way to get a way easier way to probably get just that weapon than that. So it is sort of funky.
Yeah. But on that note, I want to give
logic we're trying to have in all of them.
One of the runners and the running gags that did work for me in this movie is the like Stormbreaker and Mjolnir like love triangle with Thor.
Right.
I was like that is a funny beat each time they come back to it. I had a good time with that. Like that far outweighs the recurring goats. But
screaming.
Got a little bit of something for everybody.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's go ahead and dive into the report card where we grade from A+ to F. What do you want to give Thor: Love and Thunder here, Logan?
I'll give it a... I'll give it a C+.
That's exactly where I was going to go with it. Yeah,
I was on that line between like a C+ and a B-, and I was like, that's sort of where I was debating. But yeah, I'll give it a C+.
Yep, C+ for me as well. It's just
it's
just
so
above
mid-tier.
average. Yeah,
right. It's exactly
especially like it is the like. I mean, grading on a curve because of how fun Thor Ragnarok was.
Right, that's the problem.
This is never going to live up to it, but it's certainly, again, it's not as
it is still the second best Thor movie, probably.
Yeah, the original Thors, and Thor: Love and Thunder. But yeah, a solid C+, and that's like they there's definitely this conversation around recent Marvel movies of like, hey, yeah, they're not getting the audience scores that they used to get on these, and yeah, they got to figure out maybe something about writing the ship.
Multiverse of Madness is bad. I don't care what anyone tells me. That movie's bad.
All right. Well, extra credit, other suggestions if you did like Thor Ragnarok here. Some of these are not exactly suggestions I would make, but is what Disney Plus will give you. First up, She-Hulk Attorney at Law. I'm guessing that's just hey, watch the thing that we're currently promoting right now.
It's a good show.
So the most relevant one would be Thor Ragnarok, of course.
Yes.
Then you have Thor: The Dark World and Thor, which again,
I wouldn't watch.
Maybe skip those.
Maybe the first one.
Yeah. If you did really like Thor: Love and Thunder and are a behind the scenes nerd like I am so often, you can watch Assembled: The Making of Thor: Love and Thunder, which was another Disney Plus Day offering that just came out. You can watch the last two Avengers movies, Endgame and Infinity War, which are still just good times. Like if I ever feel like I want to get hyped, I will just throw on the last hour of Endgame.
Endgame's great.
Just knock that out. And then lastly, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, in honor of the little intro that we get from the Guardians there. There's also like this whole, like, just as a small little tangent, like it fails to cash in on the premise of Thor and the Guardians. Like, it's fun that we get like the little beat there together, but like, it would have been so wild, and I wonder how much of this was like because of all the James Gunn stuff and whatnot. Like, I wonder if there was a timeline where Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was an adventure with Thor, and then Thor: Love and Thunder comes out after that as like a departure with Thor doing like a send-off. Because like, yes, there was going to be some animosity between Thor and the Guardians at the end of Endgame going into whatever was next, but like, I think we miss something that doesn't fill in the gap between where they left off at Endgame and where their like relationship is here. Like, exactly. Peter Quill seems like to be way more happy to have Thor around and then to leave him, but like, he seems like way more chummy and buddy with Thor at the beginning of this film, and everybody else seems pissed off at Thor in a very weird way. But yeah, extracurriculars. You watching anything else on Disney Plus? Just She-Hulk? Did you catch up on the latest episodes?
I've not watched this week's yet.
Okay.
I've watched the prior episodes.
Yep. Still a fun little series there.
I like it.
Do you want to do a kind of a mini like update so far on what you thought the first few episodes?
I like She-Hulk a lot. I like, it's so interesting. Like, obviously, just like the chamber we're in online. I feel like every week the new episode drops, I just see people like, no one I follow because, I choose who I follow. But like, people like quote tweeting like, awful people online who don't like She-Hulk because she's a woman, basically, in short. And I'm like, I'm having a great time. I think the show is super fun. I think it's silly. It sort of strikes the tone I want. Is it have a lot of cameos? Sure. I don't care. It's a TV show. It's a fun TV show.
And then it calls itself out for having a lot of cameos.
Yeah, and I think it's like super like fun and self-aware, and I like when the MCU can be fun and silly. There's not enough times where it does that, and I think She-Hulk takes itself exactly the right amount of serious while having like the ability to be super fun and lighthearted. And yeah, I dig it. If it's not quite where Miss Marvel was at, but I really enjoy it. And I'm excited to just see kind of it just keep going from here. There's 8 episodes. You said, right?
I believe so. Eight or 9.
I'm excited.
I think it's 8. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't looked in a while. But yeah, I mean, we're about halfway through. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at as well. Just enjoying that. I don't think I watched anything else recently, at least not on Disney Plus. But yeah, got a handful of things I can check out for next week or in the future. So
there are 9 episodes of She-Hulk, by the way.
There you go. I heard you clicking away.
I know.
And I was like, damn it, I'm gonna have to mute that. All right. Well, that is gonna do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Logan, for joining me to discuss Thor: Love and Thunder here. You follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Loggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
Hey, shout out to every Tuesday and Thursday. Trevor Starkey does Let's Plays over there at that new site for YouTube. And Cameron is still slowly winding down Friday Night Dying Lights. We're in very much the home stretch now. So everyone stay tuned for that and applaud him because that is a crazy marathon thing he's done. And I encourage everyone to go check both of those things out. And also go check out that Nerdy Side show as well for good measure.
Cool. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. In addition to shouting those things out, I will shout out Logan's latest written piece because you just can't go, an hour without thinking about something James Bond. So he's written a piece about growing up in kind of the golden, as I tweeted out, or as I put in the tweet, golden eye era of James Bond with the gluttony of games and movies that we had for a good run there of the late of the 90s and early 2000s. So go check that out. Logan's latest written piece up on thatnerdysite.com. Anything you else you want to add to that?
I was just gonna say it was enjoy. I like writing, and so it was a nice little kind of writing jaunt, and it kind of came to me after obviously we'd wrapped up everything with that Bond show, and then kind of writing the rank of all the movies, and then kind of reading through that ranking. I kind of had the idea, and also because obviously stuff with GoldenEye Reloaded, and just GoldenEye's 25th anniversary in general, and the fact we haven't had a Bond video game in a decade now, it kind of made me reflect on a simpler time where we were getting Bond games every other year for 17 years at a minimum. And so, that was a lot of fun. I encourage everyone to go check that out. Also, of course, the giant ranking of all the Bond movies is also over there as well. So go check out both of those.
Cool. So go find all of that over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other. Class dismissed.